Miss Sadie's Divining Parlor, August 23, 1936. I was so excited to be the bearer of such important news that I ran all the way back to Shady's place. I planned to tell him the whole story of how we'd been searching for the rattler all summer, and we'd found him. So I was disappointed to find him gone. I can't say I was surprised, though, now that I knew what kept him busy at odd hours. Still, I was itching to tell somebody, so I skedaddled over to Miss Sadie's and tromped up her stairs and into her house. "Miss Sadie, guess what?" I called. "Miss Sadie?" I asked again, looking first into the parlor and then in the kitchen. I saw her through the window, sitting on the back porch. "Miss Sadie," I said, bouncing outside, "you'll never guess what happened. We found out who the rattler is. At least, we think he's the rattler. It's Mr. Underhill. He left a note at the treehouse, and we had a contest." Miss Sadie hadn't even looked at me. She just sat rocking. Her hair lay loose on her shoulders, unbrushed. Her face looked dull and ashen. I thought maybe her leg was bothering her, as it seemed to be redder and oozier than ever. I stepped closer. "Can I get you some cool water and ointment? Would you like that, Miss Sadie?" I said quietly. "The ointment does not help. There is too much sickness inside and it festers." I went ahead and got a glass of water and the balm, even though I knew she was right. When the gash on my leg got bad I was delirious with fever, the doctor had to lance it open to let out all the infection. I gently dabbed on the salve, telling her about Mr. Underhill. She nodded, but stared off disinterestedly. "Things are not always what they seem." "What do you mean? You don't think it's him?" "The line between truth and myth is sometimes difficult to see." As her voice got heavier and her rocking more rhythmic, I could feel her heading into a story. As much as we wanted it to be true, it was nothing but a myth. What was she talking about? What had been a myth? My insides got tight. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But she went on. "Who would dare think the outcast and abandoned can find a home? Who would dream that one can love without being crushed under the weight of it? A miracle cure to heal the sick? Pah! And what makes us think any of this could be true? And yet all of us, we participate in this myth. We create it, perpetuate it." Miss Sadie's voice grew deep under the weight of the story. "But what is worse, we believe it, and in the end we are crushed by it." Homecoming, October 27, 1918. Saturday, the day before the homecoming festivities, was cool and overcast, but no one seemed to mind as everyone busied themselves with preparations for the big event. Along with the changing color of leaves came a vibrant spirit among the people of Manifest. Men set up booths, hung strings of electric lights, and put on the final coat of paint on the new gazebo. It was to be a grand affair, complete with a barbershop quartet, pony rides, caramel apples, a pie baking contest, a bonsai tournament, and an evening promenade under the stars. The women were busy baking, rolling, simmering their specialties. Whether they made Greek baklava, French galettes, Italian bread, or German bicarades, all wanted to impress the others. Word had spread that Miss Cybulski had gone into labor, and everyone saw it as a good sign that their first annual homecoming celebration would also be a welcoming of a new life. They even dared to believe that their sons at war would return soon. Jinx walked past the tenant booths, through the open field near Shady's place, and watched Polly Santoni explain the rules of bonsai to a group of young men. Polly held a large hedge apple in his hand. "Now, the first thing you should know, the Italians, we invented the game of bonsai." "Is this not just an overgrown game of marbles?" called out a young Frenchman. Polly grimaced. "No! Bonsai takes true skill and years of practice. Let me explain." He displayed the hedge apple. "Think of this as a bonsai ball. You roll the ball and try to get it closest to the jack ball in the circle." He cradled the hedge apple gently in his hands. "The ball, she requires finesse and caressing, like a lady. This is why the Italians are so good at it. Watch. You don't want to knock her out, merely brush her cheek. He curled the hedge apple behind him and let fly a little harder than planned, knocking the smaller Jack out of the circle. The other young men, Frenchmen, Germans, Swedes, Greeks, all laughed. One boisterous Scot yelled, "Aye, that's amore!" Out of the corner of his eye, Jinks saw Sheriff Dean watching him. As if that wasn't uncomfortable enough, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was also watching him. Someone in the shadows. Just then, Jinks met up with Shady, glancing past him at the sheriff. Shady handed Jinks a pretzel, keeping a sausage for himself. "Compliments of Miss Ackerson." He followed Jinks' gaze. "Looks like you have a watchdog." Jinks took a bite and muttered with his mouth full, "Yeah, he watches every move I make, hoping I'll do something he can arrest me for." "Word spread all over Manifest and beyond that you're a con man par excellence," Shady observed. "But the sheriff looks like he's got more on his mind than cons." Jinks was quiet for a moment. "Shady, you've been real good to me. I think you should know I've got a few skeletons in my closet." Shady took a knife from his pocket, cut a chunk of sausage, and squinted across the field at Sheriff Dean. "Well," he popped the bite into his mouth, "what do you say we throw the sheriff a bone?" Jinks smiled. "What do you have in mind?" "Just meet me over in the clearing by that big sycamore tree where we were selling the elixir. Act like you're up to something and make sure that the sheriff follows you." A few minutes later, Jinks pulled his hat down over his eyes and gave a furtive look this way and that, and then set off through the trees. He walked slowly and stopped every once in a while to make sure he heard the sheriff's footsteps behind him. As Jinks came upon the grassy opening, he saw Shady lowering himself into the grave that had never been filled after the quarantine. "Shady," Jinks whispered in a not-so-quiet voice. "Over here," Shady whispered back, equally loud. "Here." Shady handed Jinks a gallon jug with the cork stopper. "We'd best get rid of these before the sheriff finds out there's still some left." "Too late for that," the sheriff said, peering down at Shady. Shady scratched the back of his neck like he'd been caught red-handed. "There's just these 2 jugs left, Sheriff. How about one for you and one for us?" Sheriff Dean shook his head. "Now, Shady, I thought you were swearing off the stuff." He took up one jug and reached for the other. "I think I'd better keep the kit and caboodle." Sheriff Dean uncorked one jug and gave it a sniff. "So this is 2 parts alcohol and 1 part elixir? Smells a little funny, but after a stiff couple of drinks, he'll know the difference." He replaced the cork and started to walk away, and then called back over his shoulder, "But don't think I won't have my eye on you, boy." When the sheriff was gone, Jinks gave Shady a hand up. "I thought I'd moved all the bottles that were left. I put 'em under lock and key like you said. What was in those jugs?" "A new elixir." Shady stuck a cigar in his mouth. 1 part alcohol, 2 parts prune juice. That evening, everyone was so busy putting on their finishing touches at homecoming grounds that no one noticed when a beat-up old motor scooter chugged its way into town, spitting out a plume of smoke in front of the jail. A wiry man stepped off the bike as if it was his trusty steed. He removed his goggles from his dusty face, revealing clean white around his eyes that made him look a little like a raccoon. Sheriff Dean stood in the doorway of the jail, nursing a mug of Shady's brew. "Why, Sheriff Nagelman, what brings you out to our fair state? If I recall, the Kansas side is a little out of your Missouri jurisdiction." "Knock it off, Ed. I don't have all day. Now, where's the boy?" "Ah, Leonard, what kind of greeting is that for your brother-in-law?" Nagelman lit a cigarette, realizing that he wasn't going to be able to rush Sheriff Dean. "How's life going in the big city?" Sheriff Dean asked. "Just peachy," Nagelman answered, flicked his ashes. "Now, if you're done with the chit-chat, I have a cell and maybe even a noose waiting for a certain degenerate you're harboring in this town." Sheriff Dean took another draw from his mug. "What makes you so sure that kid Jinks is your man? Besides, I thought you were looking for a pair." One of the church elders came through here last week and said he saw the same boy who was cured during the tent revival. If I can catch one, I'll get him to rat out the other. Then Louise Haskell will quit yapping at me about finding the person who killed her nephew, Junior. Besides, I got to string up somebody, and he's as good as any. Why didn't your church elder report it to me? After all, I am the sheriff here. He said there was no sheriff to be found. Nagelman looked at the jug in Sheriff Dean's hand and the jug at his feet. You must have been otherwise engaged. But who would expect any different from a no-account sheriff of a no-account town? Sheriff Nagelman took one last puff of his cigarette, then crushed the stub under his foot. Now can we go? Sheriff Dean thought for a minute, then he swallowed the last of his drink. All right, follow me. Jinx had been helping Mama Santoni and little Rosa hoist a big black pot over the fire pit so it would be ready for the simmering tomato juice the next day. When he caught sight of Sheriff Dean and the goggle-eyed sheriff he recognized from Joplin. And now you come to our house to eat, Mama urged as they finished. I can't just now, but thank you. I've got to run. And he did. Jinx ran away from the festival grounds and into the woods, fear rising in him. Maybe if he'd just lie low, Sheriff Nagelman would give up looking and go back to Joplin. As he reached the clearing near the creek, he stopped short. A man stood in front of him, blocking his way. You've been busy, haven't you, boy? Jinx stood still, his eyes darting this way and that as he looked for a way to escape. What's the matter? Don't you have anything to say to your Uncle Finn? I thought we were going our separate ways. I bet that's what you thought. Now you're all cozy in here. You think you found a home, don't you? Finn took a step closer to Jinx, inched outside of the trees into the clearing. I seen the sign outside of town. How's it read? Manifest. A town with a rich past and a bright future. I shot a few holes in that theory. Finn pulled a gun from his jacket and admired its gleam. I've been watching you, the way you latched on to folks around here. Jinx thought of the night in the abandoned mine shaft, when he thought he'd seen Finn, and other times when he felt like someone just out of his sight was watching him. Finn shook his head. You are something else, boy. I take care of you and your mama. You never lifted a hand to help my mother. Jinx's face flushed with anger. You just used me and waited for her to die. I'm not going with you, Finn. These folks are my family now. Finn's smile vanished, and his face contorted into an angry scowl. These people don't even know you. Have you told them that you're nothing but a jinx? That bad luck follows you everywhere and people all around you end up in bad straits or dying? First your daddy, then your mama, then Junior. I'm surprised no one around here has been touched by your curse. But then it's only a matter of time, ain't that right, Jinx? Jinx winced as Finn's words hit their mark. That's right, Finn continued. I'm the only one free of your hoodoo curse, and you're trying to shed me like a snakeskin. Well, let me tell you, boy, blood is thicker than water, and I'm the only blood you got. Jinx shook his head. He wanted Finn to shut up. My mother was out of her mind with sickness. She'd never have left me with you. All you wanted was a hired hand. Every con needs a mole, isn't that right? Well, I'm done. You're on your own.